Hello and a warm welcome to Federal's special program, Capital Beat. US President-elect Donald Trump has threatened the BRICS nations, which comprise of India, Russia, and China among its key members, with 100% tariffs if it moved to create a new currency or back any other option as the world's reserve. Now, Donald Trump wrote a post, and I'm going to read out exactly what he said in that post. He said, the idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any other country that tries should wave goodbye to America. So, this is what the post was written by Donald Trump. But this threat by Donald Trump to the BRICS nations, what does it mean for the individual countries? What will be its impact on the BRICS geopolitics? Joining me now is renowned economist Santosh Mehrotra with us. Thank you so much for joining. And this latest threat by Donald Trump to the BRICS nations, what does it really mean that you should not have any other currency which is almost like a parallel to the dollar?
Well, let's look at the background of all this. Um, let's not forget, first of all, he is President-elect Trump. He's not president yet, and he will not be president for another month and 10 days, or roughly like that, till the 20th of January, when he takes office. Now, he can make all sorts of fulminations just now, and we shall see how this turns out, first of all. The second thing that I think your listeners should be aware of is the following: that he is likely to get into a trade war and a tariff war with China. And his problem is China is leading the effort along with Russia for this new currency business. I don't have to tell your viewers that the United States had imposed an economic sanctions on Russia after the Ukraine invasion. The war has been going on for getting on to now nearly 3 years. And that has obviously been hurting the world economy, including the BRICS, and it has particularly hurt Russia. And please note that the summit this time took place in Kazan in Russia because Russia was the BRICS chair for this year of 2024. I have myself participated in many of these BRICS events associated with Russia, research events, and events associated with skill development and so on. The point is, what is upsetting Mr. Trump is essentially China and Russia, because China has been supporting Russia in its war effort, and the economic sanctions are against Russia. And it is to be seen in that context that here, so obviously there's going to be an attempt at a retaliation by both the Chinese as well as the Russians. India is a bit player in all of this. With all due respect, regardless of what we might think of ourselves, the fact of the matter is that India is not the key target of Trump's fulminations. I'll come back to India in a minute though, so don't misunderstand. India can be impacted, but the major targets are these two countries. In the second tier of his targeting efforts are the following countries, which have become major exporters to the United States. You see, as foreign investment has moved out of China, it has gone to essentially two major countries. It has gone to Mexico, which is just across the border from the United States, and it has also significantly gone to Vietnam. A very small part has come to India. Okay, so now we have a situation where Mexico's exports to the United States have been increasing. Vietnam's exports to them have been increasing, and therefore they are the major targets of these fulminations. Brazil has already agreed with China that their trade is going to take place in the renminbi, the Chinese renminbi. And I won't be surprised if for Brazil, China is a major trading partner. But why should that trade relationship be surprising for us? Because after all, we struck a similar deal with Russia because our oil exports were impacted, oil imports were impacted, and as a result, our refined product exports were also impacted. I don't know whether your readers know this. We import oil, and in our refineries, we refine them and we export some of that. So, there is a sort of, we managed to earn some of the export revenues, even though our imports we are very heavily import dependent. Anyway, bottom line is, we reduced our costs of the Ukraine and economic sanctions by conducting our trade with Russia increasingly, especially the oil trade, in rupees. Any surpluses that Russia had in that account, they converted those into dollars. Now, let's come back to the tariff thing, because what is the motivation of President Trump? The motivation of this announcement about 100% tariffs has rather little to do with this threat about new currency. It's really about his effort to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Because what has bothered him is that over the last 30 odd years, the United States has become heavily dependent on a whole slew of products for imports from China. Well, the point is, it's dependent in what way? They've lost jobs on the one hand because manufacturing went there, but they have been able to get cheap goods. So, because they've been able to keep, so because they are getting cheap goods, they've managed to keep their wages low. In the United States, wages are not rising, have not been rising for a while. United States is becoming a very increasingly unequal country for these reasons. That's why he is saying, here is a billionaire talking, please remember. He wants to bring manufacturing back because it is true his MAGA base, make America great again, MAGA base is very much dependent upon, he is dependent upon the MAGA base, and the MAGA base essentially comes from the working class, underclass who have become jobless and who are now stuck in jobs which are not enabling them to raise their incomes. And so that's the logic of his appeal to the American electorate. That's why he even won.
So what you were saying, Mr. Mehrotra, if I can understand correctly, and which I have, that his target basically is not India or the other countries. He's basically trying to cater to his own political constituency.
On the one hand. On the other hand, at the international level, Neeru, he is attempting to threaten and attack both China and Russia.
Right.
But he's also threatening Brazil, Mexico.
Right.
In South American country, he's also threatening them.
Right.
That, you see, he may not impose 100% tariff. The point is, he may well begin to impose more tariff. Now, point really is, how is the American electorate and the consumer going to react to that? Because, the reaction and the answer of Kamala Harris in that presidential debates around tariffs was he is going to raise costs for the American consumer by 20% because his tariffs would essentially translate into rise of costs of consumer goods by 20%. Now, please see what the context of this is in the American. The context is that that inflation rate has been very high. I mean, I was shocked. I was in the US just, one month ago, and my God, I was surprised at how prices have skyrocketed from the times that I used to live there 20 years ago. It's not just that. The jobs are not growing and wages have been stable. So when prices rise, wages have been stable. So inequality is bound to increase. So that's the context. Now, let's come back to India. I'm sorry, I've given you this entire background, but this background has to be understood to be able to make sense of Trump. I mean, right now he has no problems because he doesn't have to deliver on anything that he says. He's already won. He saved himself the risk of being behind bars because he's already a convicted felon. He would have been behind bars had he lost. So this is the reason why he was desperate to win. And so now his fulminations can go on and he can keep the MAGA base.
So just let me clarify myself, Mr. Mehrotra. So does it mean that it could look like an empty bluster of Donald Trump, or he could go ahead with 100%, if not 100% tariff, at least he'll increase the tariffs to some extent?
Now let me come back to the economics of this. I mean, I've been giving you the geopolitical economy of this. Now let me come back to the economics of this. I mean, although in the US context, I've been giving you the economics, but from an Indian point of view, let's recognize two things. I'll come back to the tariff on India in a minute, but first let's just go back to what was discussed in Kazan in the BRICS summit, because his attack was on the BRICS.
Right.
Two things were discussed. And I know there was a 40-page paper that was put up for discussion. It was written by the Russians mainly. I'm sure inputs must have been taken from the others. And this was about creating a new currency. However, that didn't go very far, and our own foreign minister, Mr. Jaishankar, said that, this is the beginning of a process. It will take years. And let's face it, it is true that a process of de-dollarization has been going on gradually for about 20 years. There was a time 20 years ago when some 75-80% of all global trade used to be in dollars. Euro came along, that shrank. So the share has been shrinking. About 58% of all global trade is conducted in US dollars. This is one dimension that we all need to keep in mind. The other dimension that needs to be kept in mind is that most of our own foreign exchange reserves are held in US dollars. And we are essentially buying US treasuries from that, like the Chinese are buying US treasuries. So all of that is held there in US banks. And this is very useful for the US for its balance of payments. Let me explain. This is why he is so frightened and is making threatening noise. That all of large major trading partners, and US is a major trading partner for us, the biggest trading partner for us. United States, China also major export surplus. We have an export surplus with the United States. We keep the dollars that we earn there. Now, you see, because they import so much and they don't export so much, so they have a trade deficit, and this is maintained by the fact that, on the capital account, we are already pumping money in there because we are holding our foreign exchange reserves in their banks in dollars. Okay. So you see how the financial system, therefore, is working. Now, all of this he wants to preserve. But it cannot be preserved. Already we've seen over a period of time, it's been shrinking. It will go on shrinking. I don't believe the new currency that was discussed is round the corner. That doesn't mean that the second proposal that you talked about and which you read out, which was also discussed, is not going to grow. It is already growing, which is, what was that second proposal? That we, each major BRIC country actually trades with each other, only each other, in our own currency. As I was explaining, India and Russia have been doing that. I was also saying Brazil and China have been doing that. So this could spread a bit. But this is not the dominant part of even our trade. So, I mean, this is not going very far. Now, I've given you all the caveats. Now, let me come back to the real problem. Where he will, impose tariffs, there's no question about it.
My first question, just before you go ahead explaining other things, but are there reasons to worry as far as India is concerned?
Yeah, that's what I'm coming to. That's exactly what I'm about to come to.
Okay.
Because yes, there are reasons to worry. There are two reasons for us to worry. Because one reason is that there is already a problem in India that this government in the last 10 years or so has been raising tariff rates. So it has increased the costs of Indian industries which are importing to be able to produce here or to produce exports, import intensive exports. So obviously, if tariffs are imposed by the Indian government on imports, and if those imports are going into Indian, because they are intermediate goods, it's usually the intermediate goods which will incur the tariff. So there'll be a tariff, and it raises the cost for the Indian producer, which is a bit of a problem for the Indian producer, because as it is, the Indian producer is not very internationally competitive for a variety of reasons, which is not the subject of it, which I will come back to later, though. Although it's not the subject of your discussion, the point is, this is one level of problem. The other level of problem, of course, is that if the United States imposes additional new tariffs on us, then it raises our costs. It raises our costs. Now, how should India be responding to this? My answer to this, if and when this happens, and even if it doesn't happen, my answer is the following, which I've been saying to the Indian government for a long time, but who listens in this government? Unfortunately, you see, our rupee has actually been appreciating. Now, ordinary people may think, when this government came to power, it was only 68 or 69 rupees to a dollar. Now it's become 84. That's a problem. But look at our inflation rate in the last 3 years, Baba. If our inflation rate is well above the US inflation rate, or the global inflation rate or our competitors' inflation rate, then the rupee must depreciate in order to offset that. Otherwise, our exports will become too costly when no one will buy, and our imports will. You understand the difficulty here?
True.
So I'm finishing here. The way to solve the problem, and this is a long-standing suggestion that most heterodox economists and economists outside government have been making to this government, that allow the rupee to depreciate. The value of the rupee against the dollar somehow is seen by politicians as a matter of national standing, prestige, etc. But the interesting thing, which these people, the BJP leaders don't understand, is that under the UPA, we gradually allowed the rupee to depreciate. And guess what the outcome of that was, Nilu? Our exports grew by 15 to 18% per annum for 20 years. If you look at a series for real effective exchange rate, which is a technical way of saying what is your exchange rate like when you take into account our inflation rate against when you compare US inflation rate. What comes out is what is called the real effective exchange rate as opposed to the nominal exchange rate. Now, you can express the real effective exchange rate of say the rupee vis-a-vis a basket of currencies, our trading basket of currencies, and the economic survey presents that data. I look at the data each time the economic survey comes out, and it is the contrast between the UPA period and this NDA period, the last 10 years, is stunning, shocking. All this has relevance for the following reason, that it has, because suppose tariffs exist. US imposes tariffs or India has imposed tariffs, whatever it is raising our cost. But that can be offset if the rupee depreciates, because that cost is offset. You see, because our rupee becomes cheaper, it's still as good. The Americans can still buy, the Chinese can still buy, whoever wants to buy will buy our products because they are not so expensive, despite the existence of tariffs. That's what I'm trying to say. So we have an answer if only we weren't terribly being nationalistic about. The UPA was not nationalistic because they had good economists in the government then, and you don't have good economists or they're not being listened to in this government. You talk to Swadeshi Jagaran Manch people. My God, their reaction to the exchange rate, and quite often that of the opposition also, with all due respect, I have to say, Nilu, is nationalistic. Arey Baba, why are you being nationalistic on something which is hurting those who are exporters, and because it gives them jobs? One reason why joblessness in our country has grown is because our merchandise goods exports, which account for 2/3 of all exports, by the way, they used to account for 2/3. 1/3 was accounted for by our services exports, our IT.
So you are the examples which you have given, so which means that allowing the rupee to depreciate is okay if you have to increase your exports.
Yes, of course. And the interesting thing is that because our merchandise goods exports were not growing, because consistently this government has kept costs high for two reasons. One, it imposed tariffs itself. You see, average tariffs in the UPA period used to be 10% or less. This government had raised it to 20-25%. And although it's recently come down to, because they've been slashing slightly, so it come down to 15, but it's still higher. So that's one reason we were not being able to export as much. The other is that our rupee was appreciating in real terms. Real meaning relative to other countries' exchange rate, inflation rate. The point is, either you control your inflation rate, then you don't have to depreciate your rupee. You get the point? You see, this government is unable to control inflation rate for the last 3 years. First 7 years, they were very lucky. International oil prices were extremely low. International oil prices, which by extremely low, I mean they were below $50. International oil prices have risen in the last 3 years to 80, and they had risen to higher, but now they are stabilized around 80-85. Now, in that context, if you don't allow the rupee to depreciate, people think, oh, it's okay to import more oil. Badi gaadi kharido, SUVs, because it's cheap to import. Huh? So you see, the rich don't care कि वो 80 रुपए petrol है or 100 रुपए petrol. It's the middle class which suffers. So this is the problem. This is wrong thinking in the government, which is actually causing joblessness. It is causing our merchandise goods exports to not, and our services exports are holding us up, and their share in our total exports have risen. But all of this is not going to solve the problem. So his threat is a serious threat. And in this context, I've given you the background. In this context, if he carries through his tariff threat, Trump, I mean, the other countries will be more seriously impacted. China will be, Russia is already doing very badly,
Right.
partly because of the war. Brazil will be impacted.
But
Mexico
then,
will,
will
will
these
also
BRIC
be.
no, but I understood your context. But in the backdrop of all this, will the BRICS nations really have the gall to come up with their own currency, or will they
No,
stall it for a while?
it will take forever, Nilu. It's not an easy thing to do. It will take forever of negotiation. There will be a backlash from the Euro group countries because obviously that will replace the euro also.
Right.
uh, and
So it
euros im-
looks like a far-fetched dream at the moment to bring up our own BRICS currency.
Absolutely, it's a far-fetched dream. I mean, if you listen to the Bhakt Mandali media, the so-called national media, will say, "Oh, India has become such a major power. India rupee is becoming an international currency." Rubbish. I mean, it will be used internationally. Even the renminbi, which has a per capita, even that country which has a GDP of at market exchange rates of 4 times ours, it's their currency is not an international currency. The major international currencies still remain the dollar, the euro, the pound, the yen. So, not much has changed. Things are changing. They were always changing. There is a hastening in the process of change, and some stupid decisions by US governments, like economic sanctions across the globe, which have continued and continued. Because look, why should Russia, India, China, Iran, etc., and there are new members coming in, why should they suffer? Because there is a government in the United States which is, for its own reasons, does takes these kinds of decisions, which hurts the rest of the world. And then they make threatening noises. Oh, we will impose 100% tariff if you go off the dollar. Of course, we'll go off the dollar if you continue in this way. The point. And so if you listen to the discourse, Nilu, in the global media, especially in the US as well, you get a sense that there is a sense of threat that American leaders, whether it's Democratic or Republican, are feeling about this emergence of the process of hastening of the process of de-dollarization. Gee, sorry,
No, no,
I
no.
didn't
No, you
speak. I've
explained
done
it
all the.
quite well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You explained it quite well. And my last question to you, and then we'll wind up the show, is that what is the biggest learning lesson for India at the moment, and what is that one thing which India should do currently, as far as
Right,
its positioning in the BRICS nation is concerned? Yes.
right. As far as the positioning in the BRICS nations is concerned, look, we have a reasonably close relationship with Russia. We have a reasonably close relationship with Brazil and with South Africa. With China, I think our relationships are not. I'm here talking about the bilateral relations, and ultimately, it's the bilateral relations which tend to dominate over these multilateral organizations, because we are all members of each country. Each BRIC country is also a member of multiple multilateral organizations. So each of us is obviously balancing our own national interests, and I can't imagine that we are going to be taking a very enthusiastic position in respect of de-dollarization, uh, which might end up helping China, for reasons I think I don't need to elaborate on. So that's one thing. The other is, what you ask, what should we do? What could we do? Honestly, to protect our own interests, we will have two routes. One is a domestic route, the other is an international route. The domestic route is, I've already explained, which is not allowing the rupee to appreciate. If anything, allow it to maintain a gradual depreciation in line with the inflation rates of other countries, so that the real effective exchange rate, you see, this REER is actually measured as an index. So let's assume that index starts at 100 in 2014. It shouldn't have been allowed to go to 110 today, which is where it probably is, which is a 10% appreciation of the rupee. Although
Absolutely.
the rupee is depreciating. Arey bhai, the others are also there's an inflation rate elsewhere. So this is one. The other is that if tariffs are imposed upon us, there is always the legal dispute resolution process in the WTO. There are
Right.
always legal disputes going on between us and other countries, including particularly is the US in the WTO dispute resolution process.
Right.
So
So,
those are the two
so
routes.
right. Right. So India does have a recourse if at all the tariffs are raised, but we'll have to wait and watch whether this was just an empty bluster or will really Trump do some walk the talk. So we'll have to wait and watch for that. Thank you so much, Santosh Mehrotra, for clearing all the doubts on such a technical and a complicated issue. Thank you very much for joining on the Federal. And one appeal to the viewers who are watching this interview: subscribe to our channel, send us your feedback, and stay tuned to the Federal. Thank you.